This is what World War III looks like. The higher this number goes, the closer we all are to getting a thermonuclear suntan. Gold has peaked at 2150 today before retracing down to the 2100 level. This is an unheard of move. Understand that a fluctuation of 2.7% in the gold market is a matter of hundreds of billions of USD valuation. The big money know that the game is rigged, that the shit's about to hit the fan, and they're starting to hedge their bets. We got a show in store for you today. Everything that we said was about to happen is happening. It's a slow motion train wreck. A new front is opening in the Middle East. U.S. CENTCOM is reportedly blaming the Iranians for the recent attack on 4 vessels in the last 24 hours by the Houthis. The Iranians are the ones who are being held responsible. What that's going to translate to into military activity is anybody's best guess, but it's probably part of the reason why we have half of our Navy there. Israel is about to deploy vessels to the Red Sea as well. And as I predicted, weeks ago, I said that this was going to cause an international shipping crisis, and that in itself is going to increase the price of goods across the board. Ukraine could potentially collapse at any moment. We have politicians being drugged and poisoned. We have a rift between the commander of the Ukrainian military forces and the president. Something is going on. The NATO chairman, Jens Stoltenberg, is saying that we should prepare for some bad news on the Ukrainian front. What the hell is about to happen? Remember, when they distinctly said, Joe Biden, NATO, they all said the same thing. If Ukraine collapses, it's going to be American and European troops that are going to be fighting World War III. Now, the Russians have been saying the opposite. The Russians have been saying, if you encroach on our territory, or these 4 annexed territories that we now perceive to be our own, then it's going to be World War III. I guess we're going to see who is telling the truth. But by the looks of things, NATO is ramping up its preparation for naval blockades around Kaliningrad. Kaliningrad is currently being surrounded. Why is it being surrounded is the question. Are we going to see Nord Stream 2.0? They're planning something because now the mission is to strategically destroy the Russian economy. This is their stated goal. Always has been, but now they have a new strategy. Cut Russia out of the Baltic Sea. That means the nuclear clock is most certainly ticking. We're going to have to wait till those geniuses in the International Bulletin for Atomic Scientists come out in January and move that doomsday clock a little bit closer to midnight, I do believe. We have nuclear war prep surreptitiously being injected into the public consciousness in the UK and on mainstream media here in America and Canada. We have Estonia saying that they may close the border to Russia at any moment. This is getting crazy. Acts of sabotage are ramping up in Russia on a daily basis. We're talking about large-scale sabotage attacks, things that, should not be happening and are well above the baseline for what you would expect for those types of disasters. We have the U.S. pledging to quadruple ammunition production. North Korea says it's only a question of when they're going to go to war with South Korea. It's not even a possibility anymore. This comes after the United States issued some threats with respect to taking down North Korean satellite capabilities. The Americans claim they have the ability to do it. North Korea said that this would be a declaration of war. And Russian gold miners set a new record for deliveries to China. Now, interestingly, China is one of the #1 producers of gold. So why would China feel the need to import so much gold? Do they know something that we don't? Well, I tell you, man, something is going on. I don't think it's FOMO. Maybe it is. Bitcoin's going up, but relative to gold, the gold market is way bigger than cryptocurrency. And of course, you have the great halving, or whatever the hell it's called. They get excited about coming in the not so distant future. So, that's going to get a lot of people FOMO'd into that market, whatever money people have left. Now, guys, this is going to be a major, major issue. This allegedly was one of the ships that was hit. Now, I don't know if this image is entirely accurate. This image is circulating on social media. Regardless, there was a direct hit on a commercial vessel. According to U.S. CENTCOM, they're saying that it's still afloat and there was attacks on 4 more. The strait in question is this strait right here, which is in between Yemen and what's it called, Djibouti? Or is it Somalia? Yeah, Djibouti. I'm probably not pronouncing that right, but what you need to know is hundreds of vessels flow through here every day, and they all go or originate from the Suez Canal. Now, this canal, I believe it was, this was the canal that was backed up. Remember back in, I think it was 2021, the ship turned on its side. I believe that they're dealing with some drought issues, either at this one or perhaps that's the one that is in South America. Actually, that's the one that's in Central America. What is that one called? Let's just check it out on the map. It is over here. What is it called? Oh, I don't have my labels on. Some Panama Canal, that's what it is. The Panama Canal was the one that was dealing with drought. I don't know if that is still an issue. There was a lot of ships still waiting to be docked there, but this is the issue in question. Now, if these ships cannot go through the Suez Canal for fear of having their ships targeted, because right now, according to US CENTCOM, they're saying that all the ships that are being targeted are not Israeli ships. And it's very difficult. We live in a globalized world. You have firms in the UK who are managing ships that might be owned by Israelis but are currently being leased out to, other countries. So it's a very tangled, globalized web we weave. As such, this puts pretty much all global shipping in the crosshairs, okay? And this is why you have so many U.S. warships within this region, and you have the Israelis now getting ready to head to Yemen. So the problem with that is that if the Israelis go to Yemen and they start lighting it up, and this is probably why Lloyd Austin is trying to, at least seemingly on the surface, rein Israel in. I still think it's good cop, bad cop, and they're highly synchronized in their activities. For the most part, you would only bestow your best weapons on a country. I'm talking about the relationship between the United States and Israel. You would only give Israel carte blanche in terms of whatever weapons they wanted if they were 100% synchronized with whatever plan the United States had in mind. Unless they're just crazy. Okay, that's a possibility. You can see my ad here for gold was just there. So you know what's been on my mind lately. So what this means is that if Israel is unrestrained and they go against the best wishes, or at least the stated best wishes of the U.S. government, what Yemen is going to do is they're going to start unloading on Saudi Arabia. They're going to light those oil fields up, and the price of oil is going to go through the frickin' roof. Never mind the fact that they're going to continue to target vessels. Then you're going to have the activation of all the Iranian militias across the map targeting U.S. military bases in the Middle East. All hell could potentially break loose if the Israeli Navy is unleashed within this region. So understand the state of things right now. I believe it's tens of billions of dollars worth of crude traverses this strait every day. That means that the price of oil skyrockets, the price of food skyrockets, the price of any commodity that goes through this region or is globally traded and globally measured in terms of its monetary value is going to increase in price, because they all now have to go around Africa, which is a long trip, as you can imagine. So that is a big, big problem, okay? Now, in terms of what is going on in Kaliningrad, because something is happening here that is not right. Today, according to a retired general for the Chief of Staff of the U.S. Army, he's saying that it is possible that the Russian leader would use an extreme measure as a strategic maneuver against the West. He says that it was very unlikely that, what was this guy's name again here? Kevin Ryan, former Chief of Staff for the U.S. Army Space and Missile Defense Command. So that is way high up there, okay? So he was saying that it was unlikely that, they thought that it was unlikely that the Russians would utilize a nuclear weapon in Ukraine because it was not tactically or perhaps even strategically useful. He is, however, saying that it would be effectively useful in a strategic sense to dissuade any sort of maneuver that might affect Russia and their grand economic interests or their exclaves like Kaliningrad, as shown here. Kaliningrad currently surrounded on all fronts by NATO countries. The only people that they have close to them is the Belarusian army, which is way down here. And of course, they have nuclear weapons, which was likely a strategic move. I believe those are medium-range Iskander missile systems that they have here that could potentially do some damage in and around here. But the big play is the access to the Baltic Sea. Now, the problem with the access to the Baltic Sea is the following. Russia is wanting to ship its oil, ship its liquefied natural gas, and it utilizes this passageway here. If they get cut off from the Gulf of Finland, or if they get cut off from the Kaliningrad and they can no longer access this, many people think this is immediately going to the nuclear level. But as we've seen a lot of surprises. We've seen numerous red lines be overstepped all across Ukraine, from Crimea to the bombing of Moscow to stated assassination attempts on Vladimir Putin himself, and they have not pushed the button. They have not pushed back against NATO pretty much at all, with the exception of a lot of espionage and possible subversion in countries which are bordering Russia, like the Baltic states, as well as they may be somewhat complacent, or complicit, I should say, in what is happening at the Ukraine border. Some people think that this is being drummed up like kind of like the truckers' protests, but it's likely, you know, the whole Russia troll farm thing 2.0 playing out in the European media, but it's hard to say. So today, a representative from the United States had indicated that they have a plan now to sanction Russia to cut them out of the liquefied natural gas market by the year 2030. Now, to me, all of these dates are optimistic because we don't know what's going to happen by the end of this year, much less the end of next year or 2030. Okay, so in thinking in terms of those long time frames, it just doesn't seem feasible or even responsible at this point in time when things are moving so quickly towards a clash between Russia and NATO. But assuming that that is the strategy, then remember what they said about Nord Stream. That's exactly what Biden said. He explicitly stated, we will make sure that Nord Stream is not operational. What happens a few months into the war? Nord Stream is destroyed and Russia is cut off from Germany. Many people believe that the reason for that is that the United States wanted to basically bankrupt Europe, which is its primary competitor. Remember, it's the euro who is one of the biggest competitors to the US dollar. So in order to artificially increase the demand for the US dollar, you want to weaken the European economy. It's not even the Chinese yuan yet. A lot of people think, well, it's going to be BRICS and stuff. Not yet. Maybe down the road it might be. But right now, in terms of the global reserve currencies, the second best one is the euro. So what you want to do is bankrupt the euro, suppress the euro by destroying their industrialization in Germany, by cutting them off of cheap energy, forcing them to import liquefied natural gas at like 3 times the rate, cutting Russia out of the energy markets for good, and the United States in their big brain, 4-year myopic, RAM only, no hard drive, no motherboard thought process, they believe that this is going to cripple the Russian economy. Now, it's just stupid because it's the same short-sighted thinking. Russia will find a way to circumvent this, as they always do. They'll find a way to trade with China. They'll find a way to trade with India some more. They'll find ways around this. Now, the question becomes, will there be more acts of sabotage in the country, as there has been, okay? Because there has been a lot of acts of sabotage. One of those was a train with 50 tanks on it that was derailed, or there was a bomb placed, and several of these tanks, I'm not sure if they were new tanks or whatever, but this is just but one of, it's been like 2 or 3 of these major, and they're always something that's a huge eyesore. It's a huge explosion. It's huge black smoke. They're meant to send a message to people that the Ukrainian resistance, or that operatives deep within Russia, are still alive and well. So what it all means is that we can likely expect a massive increase in provocations towards the Kremlin in the not so distant future, because Jan Stoltenberg is saying that, we are expecting some bad news, he's saying, from Ukraine. What does he mean by that? God only knows. But this is World War III, man. Listen, if you're a responsible person, if you have a family, and you don't have a mean to heat your home in the wintertime, you really need to look into that. There's a variety of options, okay? We put out these practical videos all the time. Nobody watches them. I don't know if it's just the algorithm is not tuned for our audience for that. But we've done videos on how to outfit your home with a wood stove, various propane heating options, how to shelter, how to insulate your home. Those are the three main things, okay? So you want to look after what do you have to wear to keep warm. That's one of the first layers. If you got to turn that heat down, or even if just the heating bill gets too high in certain places, especially like it might in Europe, then there's ways that you can mitigate that. Number one is the clothing that you're going to wear, because guys, I mean, we are going into the winter here. And if the shit hit the fan today, we could see grid down events. We're seeing cyber attacks. The sun is doing weird stuff right now. So we're getting it from all angles. The possibilities are endless in terms of how the grid could be brought down. First line of defense is your clothing, okay? Wearing warm clothing around the house so you maybe don't need to use as much heat. Or if you do find yourself in an SHTF situation, how are you going to heat a portion of your home? The first thing you're going to die of in the winter is shelter if you live in the northern hemisphere, or your life is going to become uncomfortable or unmanageable. So first thing is clothing, next thing is insulation, and then the next thing is a heating source. What are you going to use to heat? Propane, wood stove. I'll post some links in the description, not only for products that you can use for that purpose, but more importantly, the videos where we break down how exactly you can do that. Now, in terms of this Kaliningrad situation, take a look at what's going on. I went over this the other day, but it bears repeating because this situation is ramping up and nobody's talking about it. This is all happening while Ukraine is seemingly collapsing from the inside out. Now they've just passed a new law in Ukraine that says that they can come up and ask you for your papers to ensure your place of origin, whether or not your ability, you are able to be mobilized, or whether you're draft dodging. So it's getting down to the wire there. And remember that in Germany in World War II, at the time of German collapse, they still had millions of soldiers. Now, arguably, a lot of them were just people who were conscripted at the last minute and had a gun put in their hand. Nonetheless, they still had a very sizable army, okay? And things in war happen very slow, and then they happen very quickly. There's that old saying, years go by where days happen, and days go by where years happen, or something to that effect. And that's the case with war. All of these little battles and little movements that you're seeing on the map that seem insignificant in terms of the size of land that has been taken back, it will make sense when the entire thing collapses. There's linchpins, all of these things, whether it's Bakhmut, Advivka, Mariansk, or whatever the hell that other place is called. I'm not a micro-analyst for the Ukrainian war. I'm no Rybar over here, or whatever the Ukrainian equivalent is. But what we know throughout history, if you go back and you watch any of those YouTube videos that look at the progression of a war day by day, you see there's not much movement, and then all of a sudden the whole thing collapses. Case in point, World War II. Now, Nato imposes a naval blockade on the Gulf of Finland and Kaliningrad. My main man over at War News 24/7, I should say. 70,000 NATO troops surround the Russian, I was going to say enclave, but it's actually an exclave. The Baltic is on track for a full-scale conflict, okay? The Russian Navy, Air Force, and Army have been put on red alert in the Kaliningrad region as Moscow prepares for the full-scale conflict in the Baltic. We just talked about this story, but again, it bears repeating because take a look at all these data points, okay? NATO is gradually blocking and getting close to this Kaliningrad exclave where there is known to be nuclear weapons and their top-tier missile defense that they have been pulling back lately for some mysterious reason. Perhaps they don't want it to be captured, and they're seriously concerned that they may have to get rid of this. 5,000 military personnel from different states deployed on the northwestern border of the Russian Federation. 30 ships and 20 aircraft are participating in these exercises. I believe it's called Freezing Winds exercise. The U.S. units are numbering about 20,000 military personnel. That's in and around the region throughout the Baltic states, throughout the Baltic Sea, and the countries that are across the Baltic Sea. Okay, so just for perspective here, if you're not familiar with the geography of the region, here we are. So this is Kaliningrad. Okay, so we have all these surrounding countries. They're surrounded by Lithuania, Poland. This is the Suwalki corridor. We have 30,000 Polish soldiers and 10,000 Lithuanians have already been deployed. In June, the United States deployed 6 nuclear submarines armed with ballistic missiles to the Atlantic, giving Washington an advantage over Moscow in the event of a nuclear war. In addition, the West involved in the Baltic countries, Latvia has announced the need to close the Baltic Sea to Russian ships. We also know that there has been closures of borders. So Finland has closed the entire border as of November 30th, all right? We have NATO countries increasing their presence in the waters in the Baltic Sea. Of course, we have navies from all across NATO there. We have Germany announcing the dispatch of a tank brigade to Lithuania to blockade that area. We have the Russians also noted that Freezing Winds Exercise 23 scenarios leave no room for misinterpretation of what is coming in the region. They are practicing the laying of mines in and around this region to blockade, to cut them off of the Gulf of Finland, or worse, Kaliningrad. And Finland has effectively shut down land communications with Russia. Estonia and Norway are preparing to follow suit. Apparently, these measures are aimed at continuing the implementation of Western plans to block Kaliningrad, according to the Russians. So, we have the 42nd Tank Brigade of Lithuania with 5,000 military personnel moving towards the Suwalki corridor. It is likely that in the first stage, NATO will try to destroy the forces of the Baltic Fleet air defense systems in Russia. The Russian air defense air force are the most important infrastructure. And they're saying that major NATO exercises are about to take place in February to March of 2024. Now, interestingly, I was interviewing Andrew Bustamante, former CIA spy. He was saying that his prediction, he's still standing by it, that China is about to make their move on Taiwan. And as far as I know, around April is one of the few windows of opportunity when you can militarily make that move. Now, is that going to coincide with some sort of activity that is about to take place in the Baltic? Now, some people might say, wait a minute, Nate. You're saying that they're going to attack or block or create some embargo on Kaliningrad and that we're all going to live here to tell the tale? I'm saying I don't know. But what we do know is that so many red lines have been overstepped at this point. And the Russians seem comfortable, maybe not comfortable, but they seem as though they're okay with absorbing a lot of blows from NATO. Ones that we never thought they would. We never thought they would allow for the attacking of the Kerch Bridge, or the storming over the Russian border, or the bombardment of Russian nuclear facilities, nuclear bombers, or the assassination attempts on Vladimir Putin, okay? I mean, the list goes on and on and on in terms of the red lines that have been overstepped. I mean, the first act of sabotage I heard about in Russia, I was like, holy shit, and that was just like some oil facility or something. So, you know, the fact that we've come this far, I'm just saying anything is possible. And managed escalation is a thing that, you know, gets, it's overly used terminology, I think, nowadays. But we don't really know what the real back channels of communications are between the United States and the Russians. We don't know what the real red lines are. And I'm sure that this is part of the reason why the U.S. military has been hoarding all of this equipment. This is a scene outside of a military base in California, I believe, that's home to 20,000 U.S. military vehicles that are just sitting there in the middle of the desert. Look at this, as far as the eye can see. Isn't that incredible? Each one of these vehicles, I mean, a prepper would kill to have one of these vehicles as a bug-out vehicle. Sell them to us. If you're trying to upgrade the military, at least do something. Don't just decommission it. Sell it to the preppers. We need this stuff. But I mean, take a look at this. Oh, we can only have 30 Abrams tanks. Okay, guess I should buy some more Bitcoin. People believe that shit. 30 Abrams tanks. Look at this. Oh yeah, well, we gotta do some upgrading to the software, and we gotta make sure that, if the Russians capture it. Bullshit. Bullshit. Something is going on. Now, are they just using the Ukrainians as cannon fodder? The Ukrainians not see this and ask themselves, okay, what is going on? Like, really? They could send them half of this stuff and it wouldn't lead to nuclear Armageddon. So what is really going on? Is it that they know that Ukraine was a ticking time bomb in terms of a coup? Because remember how the thing is, if you take a country over by a coup, there's a good chance that that could happen in the other direction. And I've always said one of the primary concerns of NATO is that you get turncoats in Ukraine. You got sleeper cells there right now who perhaps are still in their hearts allied with the Soviet era cause, Russian cause, whatever the hell you want to call it. And they're just waiting for the moment. Okay, they're just waiting for the cue. Now, a lot of people felt that this is why the whole invasion was botched in the first place, because those people didn't rise to the occasion at that point in time. And now that it's become this democracy, has become an authoritarian stronghold, that many people are scared because, it's just one of these places where you can't speak out. And you'll get your ass sent to the front line, or you'll be taped up to a phone pole or whatever else, because that's what democracies do. So I tell you, man, something's going on, and I believe that they just, it's very sad to say, but I think that they just use those poor Ukrainians to, there were some of them who were ideological assholes who I could care less about, but there was a lot of guys who were just mobilized, against their will. They couldn't make it to the border. Zelensky said, don't worry. The Russians aren't going to invade. Everybody just stay calm, Everybody just, we don't want to block the roadways because we got to get the military ready for the war that's about to start. Oops, did I say that out loud? I meant everything's going to be okay. Russians aren't going to invade. Of course, Russians invade the next day, and right away it's martial law and mass mobilization and conscription for the war. And if you couldn't make it out of the country in time, you were SOL. You were SOL if you weren't AWOL. U.S. is quadrupling munitions production. There are rumors, and I've been saying this all along too, that of course they're trying to offload all the old stock to these countries so they can say, well, I guess we need trillions of more dollars of money we don't have to build up the military-industrial complex coffers once again. So yeah, and that's due to the high burn rate for artillery. So Jan Stoltenberg, all this talk, it could still be interpreted. All this, oh no, like Ukraine's on the back foot and we better prepare for some bad news. It could just be setting the stage for a major incident that brings us back into that conflict, like some horrific tragedy. Imagine, if you will, what is the scale of tragedy will be required for people's opinion of Vladimir Putin and the Russians, who people have softened to in the past year and a half because they just see all the clown world stuff, right? And they're seeing the same thing in Israel. People are starting to see through it. every single stupid story that comes out, whether it's dolls or whatever, is debunked, but they're starting to see through it. And they need, let's just try to brainstorm, meditate on what would need to happen for people to care again. You would need a massive attack on either a nuclear facility, or you would need a massive attack on civilians, like a blatant direct attack, which Russia hasn't. Yeah, they've been attacking civilians. There's been a few, questionable, not just questionable, but outright atrocious events that have happened, but not lately. And that's problematic for the MIC, who needs to drum up that fear and hatred for the Russians somehow. Well, how do you do that? You need a big event, okay? And if you don't get that, maybe you gotta move the goalpost to some other country where shit needs to start happening again. And it's been happening. It's been ramping up in the Baltic. So now is the time, if you are in those surrounding countries, if the bulwark that is Ukraine breaks, then that war is coming to your borders. Make no mistake about it. It is coming to your borders. That's where they're going next. Finland, all the Baltic states, Poland, you are the vanguard of that whole region as far as NATO is concerned. Because, of course, the UK and the US and, sipping their tea and eating their biscuits, they're not going to send their people to die because that would be a PR disaster. They want to send all the Slavic people to die first, right? I mean, come on, this is common sense. So, if you can get out, get the hell out. If there's nowhere to go because everywhere's fucked, then I guess that's just a problem we're going to have to deal with. U.S. capacity to disable North Korean satellites. So the North Koreans have said today, they've said, what should we get going on? What should we get on the screen here? Let's just, let's just leave that on the screen because they're starting to inject this into the public consciousness right now that they need to prepare for nuclear war again. So, North Korea successfully launched a satellite recently, okay? Recall, they rolled back the 2018 agreement, so now the demarcation line is red. Once again, concerns are rising about the possibility of the United States disrupting that very satellite's operations. The U.S. Space Command states that the U.S. can deny adversaries space capabilities through various means. Electronic warfare, disrupting communication signals, even possibly directed energy, high-energy lasers that can physically impair North Korean satellites. And does that mean it's going to light them on fire? Not necessarily, but it could mess with some of the optical systems, I presume. Anyways, the U.S. has developed and tested these anti-satellite weapons. More importantly, the North Koreans are saying that a physical clash, or that if the Americans do that, with it as it's well within America's capability to do so, that will be a declaration of war. Okay, we are so close to war on the Korean Peninsula. Most people have no idea because this is being overshadowed by all the other wars that are going on. North Korean commentator says that it's a physical clash or a war on the Korean Peninsula is only a matter of time and not a possibility. Now this maps on perfectly to why Kim Jong-un wanted those grain silos to be full by November 30th ahead of what's typically December 31st, okay? We have Kim Jong-un saying that war on the peninsula is just a matter of time. This is why they've been becoming a nuclear superpower. Now the question remains, is the satellite that North Korea just put up really that much of a game changer that if the United States took it out, would the North Koreans really view that as a strategic defeat, especially when they're probably relayed information from the Chinese, whatever sort of information that they might need from the Chinese. So they still would have that capability is what I'm trying to say. But, yeah, it's hard to say what's going to happen there. I mean, I think it's only a matter of time. At least we get a shot fired, we get a ship sunk, and then it's going to be a big fiasco, and it's going to be in the news, and Kim Jong-un's going to do a nuclear test, which the South Koreans are saying is just a couple months away. So, crazy, crazy times. Before I forget, Russian gold miners, okay? Get a load of this. Russian gold miners have set a new record. Why is China secretly buying gold? They sold 5 times more gold to Hong Kong than is typical. 527%, roughly $1 billion worth of gold. China's official data on the purchase of Russian gold is significantly lower, however. Experts believe Beijing is trying to hide from the West that it is buying so much gold. Why would it be doing this? Well, could it perhaps coincide with the selling off of U.S. treasuries? But they have to do it slow. If China came and tried to dump all its dollars in one day, well, the price of those, everybody would know the cat was out of the bag and the ship was sinking and the whole economy would tank. So they got to do it slowly but surely, okay? What else do we got to talk about today? Let's talk about this nuclear stuff because this is MSNBC, okay? It's this 50 slide picture show or 30 slide picture show that gives you explanations of how you should prepare for nuclear events. To me, I've always been concerned with our society as it's structured today, and if Ukraine was any example of this, it was that they're never going to tell you the truth if it meant that it was going to disturb the population, disturb the economy, or disturb any continuity of government plan that there might be. One of the worst things you could potentially do is come out and say, we need to prepare for a nuclear war, guys, because, you know, shit's getting real. You do that, and then the whole equation changes. People's buying habits change. The big buying habits change, okay? We start saying, maybe I don't need that second home or that rental property. Maybe I need to buy a cabin in the woods, okay? So the whole market structure changes. People start to panic. You get protests, and it causes socioeconomic instability on the whole. So they have to do something, though, because if and when an event happens, people are going to say, well, why didn't you do anything? Why didn't you say anything? Well, they can say, oh, you remember that, commercial that we had made on Fiverr by some guy from Bangladesh who just, got an internet connection? Yeah, we made that New York, go inside, stay inside, shut the fuck up commercial last year for you guys. We warned you, but if you didn't listen, it's your fault, right? And the same thing with this. They're putting out this information under the radar to try to check a box without spooking the population. It's a very delicate balance you want to walk when you're trying to have war profiteering going on. So this is why this thing came out in the Daily Mail. Now, the Daily Mail is the Daily Mail, okay? It's the Daily Mail. So you always take it with a grain of salt. Everything that Tim Pool references is something you should take with a grain of salt, especially if he uses it as a de jure media source for facts. They say, and this is a real story that happened, but how they report it tends to be a bit sensationalized. Do they know something we don't? Oh, you bet your ass they do. UK health chiefs issue guidance on what to do in a radiation emergency amid escalating World War III fears. So they're trying to tell you what you need to do. You need to get your ThyroSafe. Link for that is in the description. Your potassium iodide. You got to get your CBRN gear. You got to know how to dig a hole in the ground. You got to get some sandbags to fortify your basement if it sticks out of the ground. There's a lot of things you got to do. We've went over all those things on this channel. Get yourself a Geiger counter, all the rest. There's plenty of things that you can do, but they're trying to do it in a way which is surreptitious and not to disrupt the herd, because we got to, keep everything on the straight and narrow. Guys, I'm telling you, what happened in Ukraine before Russia invaded is the exact same thing that will happen here. I got to say this again. The same thing they told their population before the Russians invaded is the exact same thing that was going to happen here. If you think it's going to be any different here, then you are deceiving yourself, okay? Because it is going to be probably much worse. They're probably going to put out that Grand Theft Auto 6 video game right around the time that everything's kicking off, and then you're going to have that on in your virtual headset 24/7. You're not even going to realize when you take it off that, there's a million-degree suntan approaching you, and there's not much you can do about it. Here's another article. How Americans should prepare for a nuclear attack off 24/7 Wall Street. So they're starting to really subtly inject it into the public consciousness. I mean, look at this shit. Turn away, close and cover your eyes, and they forgot the part about kiss your ass goodbye. I hate saying that when there's a child in the picture because I don't want to see any children suffer, but you got to do a lot more than that. I mean, this is at least a step above. You got to get a hold of Ron at Atlas Survival Shelters if you want to have a hell of a chance of surviving if you live in a congested, densely populated region. Take a look at this. This is how the next plague is going to start. This is in Ukraine, obviously. Now this thing fires up, and look at all the rats that spew out. They're having such a problem with rats in the trenches right now. It's the wet season. You got rats falling out of the exhaust of this tank. Look at this. This is insane. You remember that mice infestation? I don't know if these mice or rats or whatever in Australia a few years back. And you're seeing the same thing in Ukraine. I mean, this is a ticking time bomb. We could see, and it might even be a false flag, but we could see biological issues on the front line emerge as a result just of the war. Okay, just as a result of soldiers being a lack of hygiene, swimming in their own feces. Rats biting people, shit like that. I mean, this is where the rage virus could start. Wow. What else? What other good news do I have? Oh, soap under lock and key. Dish soap under lock and key. I think in the future, and this is a good thing for human resources, because this means that we're going to need people to work physically in the stores to get people's stuff to unlock the cabinet. Okay? That's one win for humanity, one loss for automation. However, I think the stores of the future they're just getting us ready for big, what are they called? Concession machines, like the machines that you buy food and chips and pop from. It's going to be like that, only it's going to be a store like that. Okay, and they already have these in China, Japan, and these vending machine stores, basically. And it's just going to be a robot that picks your order for you. And you're probably not even going to have to physically pay for it. It'll just scan your iris or whatever when you go in there. Of course, nobody's going to have any money, so the places are just going to be burned down by riots. We got this situation here. This coronal hole, Earth-facing right now. The sun is about to peak. Solar maximum is about to happen here in the next year, okay? So on top of everything I just mentioned, and trust me, I only barely scratched the surface of existential threats to the human species, there's this. This could collapse a sizable chunk of the power grid, depending on which side the solar storm hits the planet. And even if it was just, say, Europe or just Asia, it would cripple the supply chain. We're talking about transformers destroyed by a solar flare. Okay, it could happen. A Carrington event could happen. It happens every few hundred years, they say. So if it happens again, it's never happened when we've been so technologically developed with satellites and telecoms and a very sophisticated power grid that requires these long circuits, these long wires in order to function. And this EMP of sorts is going to couple in to the power grid and destroy it potentially. So, do I have any other good news for you today? We talked about the Iranian issue, the Houthis lighten up I think I talked about that. Yeah, so if they attack the Houthis, right, then all bets are off. So I think they know that, which is why maybe they're even trying to negotiate with the Houthis. Maybe this is why the U.S. is trying to rein in Israel, at least pretend that they are. I still stand by my original theory that they wouldn't have all their navy situated there, thus enabling the Israelis to continue in what many, even the most staunch right-wing Americans, is starting to say, okay, this is a little excessive. You might want to tone it down a little bit. The reason why I say right-wing, because surprisingly, this has now become a political issue, okay? It was, historically, there was a unanimity, at least an equal amount of people from both sides of the political spectrum, which spoke out against what many perceived to be war crimes committed by Israel against the Gazan population. Now it's become this left-wing issue for some reason, and it's all of a sudden it's a left-wing thing when you had Muslims who used to, at one point, be avid viewers of people like Jordan Peterson. And now suddenly that's over. That's done. So if the Israelis send ships to the Red Sea and they start lighting up the Houthis, then, it's game over for the Middle East. Game over. Game, set, and match. Estonia, I think I talked about how they are about to... They're warning Estonians against traveling to Russia, and I think they were dropping some leaflets or something like that to people who lived in a certain region not to travel to Russia. But anyways, guys, that's what I got for you today. Stay tuned because we got a ton of content. Me and my main man, Dean, over at Arcopia, went and did some hunting. We got ourselves a couple does yesterday. So we're going to share that experience with you in the upcoming days and weeks ahead. We got some big interviews coming in the future that some of you are going to be surprised to see on this channel. And just a ton of stuff. Everything from gear reviews to, survival skills to things that you're just, trust me, we are working around the clock 24/7 nonstop. Okay, except when I'm spending time with my kids, which I usually do on the weekends, which is why it's a little slower around here. And it's amazing, I take 12 hours off, and the amount of news that elapses in 12 hours nowadays is unmanageable. It's like I have to run at like 3 or 4 times the pace just to catch up on the social media conveyor belt. And it's crazy how quickly things are progressing. So do me a favor, have a plan for winter. You can get cheap wood stoves off Amazon. You can get propane heaters through CanadianPreparedness.com. You can get more expensive wood stoves through us also, but you want to have a plan to heat your home and have firewood, okay? You got to make sure if you have that wood stove as a backup, just get some firewood. You can order some off Craigslist. If you're not close to a forest, it's going to stay good for a long time. It'll last for years, basically. And in the worst case scenario, and probably perhaps the best case scenario, you can use it to have a fire, have some people over and just, have a campfire or something like that. If you live in an apartment, there's also options. Insulation, clothing, different shelter capabilities, propane heaters, kerosene heaters, things you got to be careful with, but they are solutions. I predict that we are going to see one of the most apocalyptic snowstorms this year. I have a bad feeling because the climate fluctuations right now are so incredibly insane. The Arctic is currently 7 degrees hotter than the baseline. 7 degrees hotter than the baseline. We're already pretty much at 1.5 C higher than the baseline. This creates crazy perturbations in the jet stream. A lot of people are joking about, the planes are stuck in Europe and it's because it's snowing and this whole climate thing is a scam. More moisture in the atmosphere leads to more snow, leads to more erratic weather patterns. More snow is not temperature, okay? It actually typically snows when it's on the warmer side of winter. You don't always get snow in like the -30, the really cold conditions, which we don't even really see anymore, okay? So snow, a lot of people think cold. And yes, while that's true, it seems obvious, and here I said I was going to end the video, but this bears repeating, okay? So just be careful because just mark my words, we are going to see an insane winter storm. People are going to get trapped in their cars like last year. It is going to create gridlock, possibly along the eastern seaboard. We'll see. Depends on, it could happen in the west. There's what do they call it? Atmospheric river en route right now to the Seattle, California region. So it could happen there. But just be prepared. Make sure you have all the essentials in your vehicle. I think it's about time that we start releasing more winter survival videos, living out of your car if you have to for a few days, the things that you're going to need to do that. This is just common sense. This is not rocket science. This is something that you can figure out over a lazy afternoon. So I'll post some links in the comment section below. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and hit